The sterile gleam of the Mossad briefing room did little to soothe Agent Alara's perpetually restless spirit. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering, scanned the holographic projection before her, dissecting every pixel of the fortress displayed. Alara, a brilliant operative, carried a weight that few could fathom, a silent phantom haunting her every waking moment. It was a weight born from fire and loss, etched into the very core of her being during a mission that had ripped away more than just her cover. Years ago, the mission had been critical, intercepting a high-value target known only as the puppeteer. Alara had been younger then, less hardened, but no less skilled. The operation had gone sideways. A meticulously planned ambush turned into a bloodbath. In the chaos, she had witnessed the brutal precision of the puppeteer's network, and the cost of their failure had been excruciatingly personal. A mentor, a friend, a piece of her own soul, all lost in the inferno. The man responsible for orchestrating that devastation, the mastermind behind countless global terror plots, had since ascended to a mythical status, known now only as the Architect. He operated from an impenetrable fortress, a twisted monument to his own malevolence, somewhere deep within hostile territory, a place whispered about in hushed tones, even within the intelligence community. For Alara, the line between duty and vengeance had long blurred into an indistinguishable, fiery resolve. Every tactical decision, every grueling training session, was fueled by the ghost of that past, by the memory of the life taken from her. The Architect wasn't just a target. He was an open wound, festering with every new atrocity attributed to his name. Today, the holographic display in the briefing room pulsed with a new urgency. Director Cohen, his face grim, gestured towards the flickering images. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice a low rumble, "we have new intelligence. The Architect is preparing something unprecedented, something that could redefine global catastrophe." The room buzzed with suppressed murmurs, but Alara remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the fortress, a dark castle rising from a digital wasteland. "Our sources indicate he's acquired components for a device capable of widespread, uncontainable destruction. The timescale is aggressive. We have days, not weeks." A wave of skepticism rippled through the gathered agents. Infiltrating the Architect's domain was considered a suicide mission, an exercise in futility. One veteran agent, his face etched with years of impossible assignments, voiced the collective doubt. "Director, with all due respect, that fortress is impregnable. We've tried before. It's a meat grinder." Cohen's gaze swept the room, finally landing on Alara. Before he could speak, she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension, clear and resolute. "I'll go." Her declaration hung heavy in the air, a mixture of shock and reluctant understanding washing over the faces of her colleagues. They knew her history, knew the personal demon she carried. This wasn't just another assignment for Alara. It was an exorcism. Director Cohen nodded slowly, a flicker of something akin to grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Agent Alara volunteers to lead the mission. This is not a retrieval operation. This is a neutralization. And let me be clear," he added, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper, "this mission is a one-way ticket. There will be no extraction plan, no rescue. You go in, you complete the objective, or you don't come back." Alara met his gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. She knew. She had always known. The Architect's latest scheme wasn't just a threat. It was her personal reckoning. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Alara's resolve, though hardened by years of loss, still recognized the impossibility of the task ahead. She understood that even her unwavering determination, her singular focus on the Architect, would not be enough. This mission demanded more than just courage. It required a symphony of highly specialized, unconventional talents. With the director's grim blessing, she began assembling her ghost team, a hand-picked ensemble of individuals whose skills were as sharp as their pasts were complex. First, there was Kyle. Alara found him operating on the fringes, a ghost in the machine, capable of bending technology to his will with an almost supernatural ease. His movements were fluid, his gaze perpetually distant, as if constantly processing an unseen stream of data. Kyle was a master infiltrator, capable of disabling the most sophisticated security systems with a few deft touches, navigating digital labyrinths as easily as others walked a familiar street. His past, a tapestry of shadowy operations and whispered rumors of insubordination, made him an outcast, but to Alara, it made him invaluable. He carried a stoic silence, a quiet intensity that spoke volumes of battles fought and scars acquired, both visible and hidden. Then came Lena, a whirlwind of charisma and cunning. Her ability to mold identities, to slip into any role with natural grace, was legendary. Lena wasn't just a master of disguise, she was a psychological chameleon, capable of manipulating emotions and extracting secrets with a disarming smile or a perfectly placed word. Her loyalty to Alara was absolute, forged in the crucible of shared dangers and unspoken understanding. Where Alara was fire, Lena was water, flowing effortlessly, adapting to any circumstance, yet possessing an underlying current of immense power. Her eyes, often sparkling with mischief, could turn cold and calculating in an instant, revealing the steel beneath the charm. Finally, there was Rami, the explosives expert, a man who found a dark, almost morbid humor in the destructive power he wielded. Rami was a family man, his wallet perpetually filled with crumpled photos of his wife and 2 young children, a stark contrast to the profession that consumed him. His hands, though capable of intricate, delicate work with detonators and wires, seemed permanently stained with the dust of demolition. He could calculate blast radii in his sleep, his mind a steel trap for physics and structural weaknesses. Rami's jovial exterior often belied the sharp, meticulous intellect beneath, a mind perfectly suited for controlled chaos. The team converged in a remote, heavily fortified training facility, a place where the lines between simulated reality and desperate necessity blurred. Days bled into weeks, marked by relentless drills. Kyle would navigate laser grids blindfolded, Lena would charm her way through mock interrogation rooms, and Rami would meticulously disarm or set charges on complex structural models. Alara pushed them, demanding perfection, dissecting every error with surgical precision. Her leadership was demanding, unwavering, yet a fierce, almost maternal protectiveness radiated from her, especially when they faced their limits. She saw not just operatives, but individuals, each carrying their own burdens, their own reasons for being there. Kyle, she suspected, sought redemption for an unnamed past transgression. Lena, an escape from the suffocating expectations of a life less adventurous. And Rami, the constant pressure of providing for a family that knew nothing of his true work. Each member carried personal stakes, subtle yet profound, woven into the fabric of their commitment. The plan they meticulously crafted seemed utterly impossible, infiltrating the architect's fortress, a bastion of tyranny nestled deep within the most heavily guarded territory in the world. It was a fortress designed to repel, to deter, to annihilate. Their first major hurdle emerged almost immediately. A critical piece of intelligence regarding the fortress's subterranean access points was missing, a gap in the data that could doom the entire operation. Alara knew the official channels would be too slow, too compromised. This demanded a dangerous, unsanctioned intel-gathering operation. Kale, utilizing his unparalleled digital prowess, identified a vulnerable data hub in a neighboring city, a seemingly innocuous civilian network that, with the right key, could unlock the information they desperately needed. The mission was swift, brutal, and precise. As Kale remotely accessed the system, a sudden, unexpected counter-intrusion attempt nearly exposed them. Lena, ever vigilant, sensed the digital ripple, shouting a warning just as Kale narrowly severed the connection. It was a close call, a stark reminder of the immediate danger that clung to their every move, but it also solidified their cohesion, their reliance on each other. The Ghost Team was ready. The Ghost Team's journey into the hostile territory began under the cloak of a moonless night, a silent serpentine movement through treacherous terrain. Every shadow seemed to conceal an unseen threat, every rustle of leaves a potential ambush. Alara led with an almost primal instinct, her senses heightened, her mind a constant flurry of calculations and contingencies. Kale moved like a phantom, his specialized gear allowing him to blend seamlessly with the environment, his eyes scanning for thermal signatures and tripwires that would betray their presence. Lena, ever the chameleon, had already begun subtly altering her appearance, shedding her previous persona for one that would allow her to melt into the local populace when the time came. Rami, surprisingly light-footed for his build, carried his formidable toolkit with practiced ease, a silent promise of explosive solutions should they be needed. Their initial infiltration was a ballet of precision and restraint. A perimeter fence, supposedly electrified and motion-censored, yielded to Kyle's nimble fingers. A brief flicker of sparks, the only testament to his silent victory. They navigated a labyrinth of derelict buildings, each crumbling structure a potential hiding place for enemy patrols. A near miss occurred when a lone guard dog, its senses sharper than its handlers, began to bark furiously, its cries echoing through the night. Rami, with unnerving calm, produced a small silent dart gun, neutralizing the animal before it could raise a full alarm. The tension was palpable, a tight knot in every stomach, but their training, honed to a razor's edge, allowed them to flow past each obstacle, a single unified entity. Their expertise shone brightest in these moments, a testament to Alara's demanding leadership. As they delved deeper, the oppressive atmosphere of the architect's domain began to press in. It wasn't just the physical barriers, the fortified checkpoints, or the omnipresent surveillance. It was a psychological weight. The air itself felt heavy, laden with fear and unspoken suffering. The locals they encountered, furtive figures darting through narrow alleys, carried a haunted look in their eyes, a deep-seated terror that spoke volumes of the tyrant who ruled them. Their first contact with local resistance came through a series of prearranged signals, a flickering light in a specific window, a coded message etched onto a crumbling wall. The asset, a gaunt, wary woman named Anya, met them in the cavernous darkness of a forgotten underground market. Her eyes, though shadowed with exhaustion, held a spark of defiant courage. The alliance was tense, forged in mutual desperation rather than trust. Anya spoke in hushed tones of the architect, her voice laced with a mixture of reverence and utter loathing. He was not just a leader, he was a mythical entity, his influence pervasive, his reach seemingly limitless. Whispers of his cruelty, of public executions and disappearances, painted a grim picture of his iron-fisted rule. The team saw evidence of this cruelty everywhere. Malnourished children, hushed conversations, the palpable fear that permeated every interaction. Alara felt a familiar, cold dread coil in her gut. This was the monster she had vowed to destroy, the architect of her own personal tragedy. As they prepared for the next phase, a critical piece of equipment, Kale's primary encrypted communication device, suddenly malfunctioned, a vital link to their remote support. It was now a dead weight. Frustration flickered across Kale's stoic face, a rare crack in his composure. He worked feverishly, muttering technical jargon, but the device remained stubbornly inert, seemingly corrupted beyond repair. The unexpected setback left them feeling more isolated, more vulnerable deep within the serpent's lair. Just as Alara began to consider alternative communication methods, a sudden jarring explosion ripped through the silence of the night, not far from their location. The ground trembled violently, sending dust and debris raining down from the market's ceiling. Before they could react, a barrage of automatic gunfire erupted from dimly lit alleyways, targeting Anya's resistance cell. Chaos erupted, shouts and screams filling the air. Alara barked orders, pushing her team to cover, but in the confusion, a figure, small and swift, was separated from their group. It was Lena, caught in the crossfire, isolated amidst the sudden, unexpected ambush. The deafening roar of the explosion still echoed in their ears as Alara's instincts took over. "Kyle! Suppressive fire! Rami, cover fire! Get to Lena!" she commanded, her voice cutting through the din with chilling clarity. Kyle, recovering swiftly from the initial shock, unleashed a controlled burst from his silenced assault rifle, driving the attackers back into the shadows. Rami, a whirlwind of motion, laid down a curtain of fire with a heavy machine gun scavenged from Anya's makeshift armory, its rhythmic thudding a grim counterpoint to the enemy's erratic bursts. Ilara herself moved with predatory grace, her pistol spitting fire, each shot precise, aimed for incapacitation rather than death, a subtle nod to her Mossad training that prioritized intelligence gathering. Amidst the chaos, they saw Lena, a fleeting shadow darting between stalls, her training allowing her to evade the immediate onslaught. Rami, using his bulk and firepower, carved a path towards her, his movements surprisingly agile for such a large man. He reached her, grabbing her arm and pulling her back into their defensive perimeter, just as a volley of rounds shredded the wooden crate she had just hidden behind. Lena, though shaken, immediately rejoined the fight, her eyes scanning for weaknesses in the enemy's formation, her own small sidearm delivering accurate, debilitating shots. The ambush was fierce, but the Ghost team, a well-oiled machine, responded with brutal efficiency. Within minutes, the attackers were either neutralized or had retreated back into the labyrinthine alleys, leaving behind a trail of spent casings and the acrid smell of gunpowder. The immediate danger past, a tense calm descended upon the market. Ilara surveyed the scene, her gaze lingering on the fallen enemies. This wasn't a random patrol. It was a targeted strike, too precise, too well coordinated. A cold suspicion began to worm its way into her mind. "They knew we were here," she stated, her voice low and dangerous. "Someone tipped them off." The air crackled with unspoken accusations. Kale, always pragmatic, began examining a discarded communication device from one of the attackers. "Their comms are encrypted, but the frequency—" "It's too close to ours, Ilara. Almost identical." Ilara turned to Kyle, her eyes narrowing. "You're past, Kyle. You've always been evasive about it. Any old friends who might recognize your methods?" Kale's stoic facade wavered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before it was replaced by his usual impassive mask. "My past is buried, Ilara. Deep. But yes, there are those who would recognize my signature." He didn't elaborate, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Lena, ever the astute observer of human behavior, watched the exchange, her mind already working, dissecting Kale's subtle tells. Later, as they regrouped in a hidden alcove, she approached Kale. Her voice was soft, almost hypnotic, her psychological tactics already at play. "Kale," she began, "trust is paramount here. Ilara needs to know everything. We all do. This isn't just about us, is it? There's something more, something personal that ties you to this place, to the Architects Network." Kale, usually unyielding, found himself strangely compelled by Lena's probing gaze. He remained silent, but his jaw tightened, betraying an internal struggle. Meanwhile, Ilara, still troubled by the ambush, began to analyze the recovered enemy comms data with the help of Anya. Hidden within the chatter, they found a coded message, faint but distinct. It wasn't from the Architect's usual channels. The encryption was sophisticated, almost Mossad level. The message itself was brief, a series of seemingly random numbers, but Anya's eyes widened in recognition. This is a dead drop code. It suggests a mole, Ilara, within your own intelligence agency." The revelation hit Ilara like a physical blow. A mole within Mossad. The very thought was sickening. Before they could fully process this new, chilling information, a new set of coordinates arrived through Anya's rudimentary network, supposedly from a trusted resistance contact. It detailed a vulnerable supply convoy of the Architects, a prime opportunity for disruption. It seemed too easy, too perfect. Ilara, her suspicion heightened by the potential mole, felt a prickle of unease, but the intel was corroborated by other fragmented reports. They moved on the target, only to find themselves ambushed once more, this time by a far larger, better-equipped force. It was a trap, a diversion. As they fought their way out, barely escaping with their lives, Rami received a cryptic, untraceable message on his personal encrypted burner phone. It was a distorted image, grainy but unmistakable. A picture of his children playing in a park back home, overlaid with a single chilling word: cooperate. The Architect was not only playing games with them, but he was reaching across continents, threatening their loved ones, adding an unbearable layer of pressure. The true target of the architect's ultimate plan, Ilara realized with a sickening lurch, was far more devastating than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about a weapons cache or a strategic location. It was about dismantling their very lives, piece by agonizing piece. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, a metallic tang in Ilara's mouth. The ambush hadn't been a mere setback. It was a carefully orchestrated diversion, designed not just to eliminate them, but to humiliate and distract. The supply convoy was a phantom, a lure, pulling them away from the true prize, whatever that might be. A cold dread settled deep in Ilara's gut. The architect wasn't just a strategist. He was a puppeteer, pulling strings they hadn't even known existed. Then, the message came, piercing through their encrypted channels like a poisoned dart. It wasn't a static-laden broadcast or a coded communique. It was a direct, chillingly clear voice. The architect. He spoke Ilara's name, enunciating each syllable with an unsettling familiarity. He recounted details of her past, not just the mission that had claimed her family, but intimate moments, forgotten conversations, the very fabric of her personal loss. Such a tragedy, Ilara. His voice purred, laced with a mockery that clawed at her soul. To lose everything, only to chase phantoms. Do you truly believe avenging the past will bring it back? His words were psychological warfare, meticulously crafted to unravel her. He painted vivid pictures of her family, their laughter, their final moments, twisting the knife in her oldest, deepest wound. For a fleeting, agonizing second, Ilara's resolve wavered. The memories, so carefully compartmentalized, threatened to overwhelm her. Her hand instinctively went to the locket hidden beneath her tactical vest, a silent plea for strength. But then a hand found her shoulder. It was Rami, his grim face etched with concern, a silent promise of unwavering support. Lena, her eyes burning with fierce loyalty, stood ready, her usual playful demeanor replaced by a steely determination. Kyle, though still guarded, met her gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between them. They were her team, her family in this desolate landscape. Their silent solidarity was a lifeline, pulling her back from the precipice of despair. Kale, seeing her struggle, finally broke his silence, his voice rough but sincere. He preys on weakness, Ilara. He knows what he's doing. He paused, then continued, his gaze distant. I have a family too, a daughter. I understand what he's trying to do. The confession hung in the air, a hidden vulnerability laid bare, a testament to the architect's insidious pressure and the growing bond within the team. For Kale, the stoic infiltrator, this was an unprecedented emotional disclosure. Lena, ever the analyst, had been quietly observing Ilara's reaction, processing the architect's words. She turned to Anya, her voice urgent. The pattern. He always leaves a signature. The previous attacks. The seemingly random bombings. There's a rhythm, a cadence to his destruction. She began to furiously trace connections on a crude map, her fingers flying over the marked locations. He's not just reacting, he's anticipating. He's shaping events. He's predicting our moves, and then setting the stage for his own. Lena's mind, a labyrinth of deduction, began to predict his next devastating move. Just as Lena was hypothesizing, a desperate message crackled over Anya's network. The local resistance, their tenuous allies, had suffered a major setback. A supply line, critical for their survival, had been ambushed and destroyed, their safe houses compromised. The architect was systematically dismantling their support structure, further isolating the ghost team in this hostile land. The news was a hammer blow, crushing their hopes of local assistance. Ilara's mind raced, a whirlwind of strategies and impossible choices. The architect was not merely a threat. He was a mirror, reflecting her own pain, using it against her. Lena's analysis suggested a devastating attack on a civilian population center, a move calculated to maximize chaos and draw global attention. The intel was clear: neutralize the architect, or thousands would die. But the path to neutralization involved a terrible calculation, a difficult moral choice. Could she sacrifice a civilian population, even a small one, to achieve the mission, to prevent a greater catastrophe? Or was there another way, a third path that didn't demand such a horrific cost? As Ilara grappled with this agonizing dilemma, a subtle detail from the architect's taunting message resurfaced. A specific turn of phrase, a unique idiom he had used, one she hadn't heard since her childhood. It was a phrase her father used to say. A cold, nauseating wave washed over her. The architect wasn't just someone tied to her past. He was her past. A shocking revelation, a truth so monstrous it threatened to shatter her very being. The architect was not merely an enemy. He was her brother, believed dead for decades, twisted by hatred and ideology, now orchestrating global terror. The truth, a venomous serpent, coiled around Ilara's heart, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Her brother, the architect, the monstrous architect of global terror, the phantom responsible for her family's annihilation, was the very blood that flowed through her veins. The revelation wasn't just shocking, it was a devastating earthquake, shattering the bedrock of her understanding, twisting her grief into a grotesque, personal betrayal. Every mission, every sacrifice, every sleepless night fueled by vengeance, had been a pursuit of a ghost, a brother she had mourned for decades, now resurrected as her ultimate enemy. Her motivation, once a clear-cut path of duty and retribution, fractured into 1,000 shards of complex, agonizing emotional turmoil. How could she kill him? How could she not? The team, witnessing the profound shift in Ilara's demeanor, the haunted look in her eyes, knew instinctively that something catastrophic had transpired. Though Ilara remained silent about the true identity of the architect, the sheer scale of the deception, the depth of the personal vendetta against her, became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't merely a mission, it was a crucible, forged in the fires of a twisted family history. Their loyalty, already fierce, solidified into an unbreakable bond as they recognized the immense burden Ilara now carried. Rami, his mind a whirlwind of schematics and demolition plans, understood that their previous infiltration strategies were now obsolete. The architect knew them too well, anticipated their every move. He needed to think outside the box, to create a plan so audacious, so seemingly impossible, that it would catch their enemy off guard. Hours were spent hunched over salvaged satellite images and crude blueprints, Rami sketching furiously, his dark humor momentarily eclipsed by a grim determination. His family's safety, the desperate image of his children, was a constant burning motivator. He devised a daring new infiltration plan, one that leveraged the fortress's unexpected structural weaknesses and their combined, unique skill sets. It was a high-risk, high-reward gambit, requiring perfect timing and unwavering execution. Meanwhile, Lena, observing the fortress's routines, noticed a pattern in the diplomatic convoys entering and exiting the architect's inner sanctum. Her mastery of disguise and psychological manipulation, usually employed for subtle information extraction, would now be put to its ultimate test. She crafted an elaborate persona, a high-ranking diplomat with impeccable credentials, complete with a fabricated backstory and a flawless accent. It was a dangerous play, requiring her to walk directly into the lion's den, risking immediate exposure and capture. But gaining access to this critical area was paramount. It was the only way to plant the surveillance devices that would confirm Rami's structural assessments and provide a direct line to the architect. The stakes were astronomical, yet Lena moved with a chilling calm, a predator blending seamlessly into its prey's environment. Kyle, haunted by his own past demons, the secret family he protected, the mistakes he'd made, watched Ilara with a silent, profound understanding. He knew the weight of impossible choices, the burden of leadership. When Rami's plan required a crucial high-risk distraction, Kale didn't hesitate. It involved triggering a series of cascading system failures in the fortress's outer perimeter, drawing a significant portion of the architect's security forces away from their intended infiltration point. The catch: Kyle would need to remain behind, exposed and vulnerable, for a critical window of time. ensuring the system failures were convincing enough to divert attention. It was a sacrifice, a direct confrontation with his own fears of abandonment and exposure. But for Alara, for the team, he made the choice without a flicker of doubt. His checkered past, his guarded nature, gave way to an unwavering commitment. Through Lena's daring infiltration, they discovered something vital. The architect, for all his meticulous planning and impenetrable defenses, harbored a singular, unexpected vulnerability. It wasn't a physical flaw in his fortress, nor a weakness in his security protocols. It was a deeply personal, psychological reliance on a specific, ancient artifact, a relic he believed held mystical power, a source of his perceived invincibility. This artifact was housed in a secluded, almost forgotten chamber deep within the fortress, protected not by guards, but by its perceived insignificance and its obscure location. This was their leverage, their unexpected Achilles heel. However, as they prepared to exploit this newfound weakness, a chilling realization dawned upon them. The architect, always a step ahead, had foreseen their discovery. He knew they were close. The very vulnerability they intended to exploit was now a meticulously laid trap, a final, deadly snare designed not just to capture them, but to break them completely. The game was reaching its brutal climax. The team moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, each member a cog in a deadly, intricate clockwork. Rami's hands, usually nimble with explosives, now moved with a surgeon's delicate touch, setting charges designed not for destruction, but for distraction. The dull thud of the first detonation echoed through the subterranean tunnels of the architect's fortress, a calculated tremor that sent ripples of panic through the enemy's ranks. Security alarms blared, a discordant symphony of chaos, as guards scrambled, drawn away from the inner sanctum like moths to a flame. This was Rami's masterpiece, a symphony of controlled mayhem. As the explosions diverted attention, Lena, her face an unreadable mask of determination, slipped through a newly created breach in the perimeter. Her diplomatic disguise had served its purpose, allowing her to map critical pathways and surveillance blind spots. Now she moved with the silent grace of a phantom, her objective to disable the internal security grid, creating a window for Kale. She navigated the labyrinthine corridors, her psychological manipulation skills honed to a razor's edge, anticipating guard rotations and exploiting human error. Every shadow was her ally, every blind corner a strategic advantage. She was a ghost in the machine, systematically dismantling its defenses from within. Kale, waiting for Lena's signal, felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. His past, a tapestry woven with mistakes and regrets, now fueled his resolve. This wasn't about redemption. It was about protecting Alara, protecting the innocent. He moved through the darkness, his tech-savvy infiltration skills allowing him to bypass laser grids and pressure plates with uncanny ease. His mission was to secure the chamber housing the ancient artifact, the architect's perceived source of power, and prepare it for Alara's arrival. He was the vanguard, clearing the path, making the impossible possible. Alara, her heart a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, moved towards the architect's inner sanctum. The explosions, the alarms, the distant sounds of skirmishes faded into a dull roar against the thunderous beat of her own pulse. She pushed through the metallic door, its heavy clang echoing in the sudden silence of the chamber. There he was, her brother, the architect, seated at a vast obsidian desk, his eyes so chillingly familiar, fixed on her. The air crackled with a tension thicker than blood. "Ilara," he began, his voice a low, resonant purr that sent shivers down her spine. "I knew you would come. Always so predictable, my dear sister." His words, laced with a twisted affection, twisted the knife deeper into her already wounded soul. He spoke of his motivations, a rambling monologue about perceived injustices, the corruption of the world, his belief in his own righteous path to forge a new order through chaos. He saw himself not as a terrorist, but as a misguided savior, a god in the making. His twisted logic, his utter conviction, was chilling. Alara stood, her weapon steady, her internal struggle a raging battle. To kill him would be to sever the last, agonizing tie to her past, to extinguish the last flicker of the boy she once knew. To capture him would mean dragging him through a system he scorned, a process that might never truly bring justice, only more pain. Vengeance or justice? How could one choose when the lines were so irrevocably blurred? Suddenly, a searing pain ripped through Alara's side. The architect, faster than she anticipated, had lunged, a hidden blade glinting in his hand. She stumbled back, clutching her wound, her vision blurring. The architect advanced, his face contorted into a mask of triumphant fury. "You always were too sentimental, Alara," he sneered. "A weakness I learned to shed." Just as he raised the blade for a final fatal strike, Cale burst into the chamber, his face etched with grim determination. He tackled the architect, sending the blade skittering across the floor. A desperate, brutal fight ensued, Cale, despite his tech-savvy nature, surprisingly adept in close-quarters combat. But the architect was relentless, fueled by years of hatred and fanatical conviction. He landed a devastating blow, sending Kyle crashing against a reinforced wall, a sickening crack echoing through the room. Kyle lay still, a crimson stain blooming on his temple. Alara, despite her injury, felt a fresh surge of cold fury. Cale, her loyal, stoic friend, lay wounded because of her. She had the architect cornered now, his back against the wall, but a chilling glint in his eyes told her this was far from over. With a maniacal laugh, he pressed a hidden button on his wrist. "You may have found my weakness, sister," he gasped, blood trickling from his lip. "But you cannot stop my ultimate vision. This fortress, it will be my final masterpiece. A fail-safe, dear Alara, one that will ensure neither of us leaves here alive." Alara, her breath ragged, watched as the digital countdown on a holographic display flickered into existence above the architect's desk. The numbers plummeted with terrifying speed, each digit a hammer blow against her already fractured resolve. The failsafe wasn't a localized explosion. It was a cascading collapse, designed to bury the entire complex and everyone in it, under tons of rock and concrete. Her brother, in his final act of defiance, sought to make their confrontation a tomb for them all, a twisted monument to his warped ideology. Ignoring the throbbing pain in her side, Alara's mind raced, sifting through every detail she knew about the architect's convoluted security systems. She remembered the schematics Cale had meticulously analyzed, the structural weak points, the emergency override protocols. There was a chance, a slim, almost impossible chance, to halt the sequence. She pushed past the groaning Cale, who was slowly stirring, his eyes fluttering open in a daze, and lunged for the control panel embedded in the wall. The architect, his laughter now a gurgling cough, watched her, his eyes blazing with a mixture of madness and triumph. He believed he had won, even in defeat. Her fingers, slick with her own blood, danced across the complex interface. Codes flashed, warnings blared, a symphony of digital alarm. She remembered Cale's frantic whispers about a hidden master override, a sequence of ancient symbols tied to the very artifact the architect so cherished. It was a flaw born of his own hubris, a backdoor he had created for himself, believing no one else could decipher it. With a final, desperate input, she slammed her palm onto the console. The countdown froze, then, agonizingly slowly, began to reverse. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled her knees, washed over Alara. The immediate threat of burial was averted. The architect, his eyes wide with disbelief, slumped against the wall, defeated not by force, but by the very intellect he had sought to destroy. He was neutralized, his grand destructive vision crumbling around him, not in a blaze of glory, but in the quiet, methodical triumph of his sister. The victory, however, felt hollow, a bitter ash in her mouth. The man who lay before her was not just a global terrorist. He was the ghost of a brother, a reminder of a past irrevocably stained by tragedy. Soon the muffled sounds of Lena and Rami's frantic arrival echoed through the chamber. Their faces, etched with concern and relief, were a welcome sight. Kyle, though clearly injured, managed a weak smile. They were battered, bruised, but alive. The extraction was arduous, a careful retreat through the now partially collapsed corridors, the air thick with dust and the acrid smell of burnt wiring. They moved with a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the price paid, the sacrifices made. Back in the relative safety of the extraction point, Ilara finally allowed herself to lean against a cold metal wall, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving behind a gnawing emptiness. The mission was accomplished, the immediate global catastrophe averted. Yet, the weight of her past, of the choices made and the lives lost, settled upon her shoulders with renewed intensity. The architect's neutralization brought no true peace, only a different kind of burden. Kyle, his head bandaged, approached her, a silent offering of water in his hand. Lena, ever perceptive, understood the unspoken grief that shadowed Ilara's eyes. Rami, for once, was quiet, his usual quips replaced by a somber respect. They had seen her at her most vulnerable, witnessed the raw, personal nature of her conflict, and in doing so, their loyalty had deepened, forged in the crucible of shared danger and profound understanding. They hadn't just completed a mission, they had navigated a personal hell alongside her. The local populace, once cowering under the architect's tyranny, slowly began to emerge, a fragile hope blossoming in their eyes. Aid organizations would follow, rebuilding efforts would commence. It was a long road, but a road nonetheless. Ilara knew that true justice was a complex, ongoing process, not a singular act of vengeance. Her brother was gone, but the scars he left on the world and on her soul would remain. Days later, in a sterile safe house far from the dust and echoes of the fortress, Ilara sat alone, a worn photograph clutched in her hand. It was an old image, faded at the edges, of two children, a boy and a girl, laughing in the sunlight. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, quickly fading. Forgiveness was still a distant horizon, but acceptance, a quiet, weary acceptance of the past, had begun to take root. The mission had exacted its toll, but it had also, paradoxically, brought a strange form of clarity. She was still Ilara, a Mossad operative, haunted but resilient. The world remained a dangerous place, filled with shadows and new threats, and as she gazed at the photograph, a quiet resolve settled in her eyes, a readiness for whatever challenges the future might bring. Her duty, her purpose, continued.